greetings and merry meet. According to 2022 census data, we have 40.8 million people, or about 12.7% of the United States population, with a disability. So what that means is that many family members become caregivers to adults and children, often without advance warning. And they take on this new role that becomes a real shock to the system, at least initially. So today, what we're going to do is hear about how we can embrace grace amidst what can be a really stressful and heartbreaking experience, and take on this role with love. So I'm Dr. Kathryn Bingham, founder of Leadistics. I serve executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals to elevate their leadership and achieve dreams through strategic redesign or pivots, and change their life, change their work, and change the world. I'm also the author of Driving Pink. But today, our guest, Mary Tutterow, is the author of The Heart of the Caregiver. Let me show you what that looks like. And The Peaceful Caregiver. She's a wife, a mom, author, speaker, teacher, and caregiver. With a background in media and public relations, she wrote The Heart of the Caregiver during some of her family's most difficult years. And Mary began teaching the content to small groups as an excuse to have other caregivers to share with. I'm going to come back to that in just a few minutes. There are challenges that only those who've experienced being a caregiver can actually relate to and fully understand. But Mary takes joy in helping other frazzled caregivers find beautiful transformation in the caregiving process for themselves, for their family, and for the people they care for. So Mary, welcome.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
So getting started, Mary, tell us a little bit about your journey that led to writing The Heart of the Caregiver.
Well, it all started with the birth of our daughter 31 years ago. She was our first child, and she was born medically fragile and mentally and physically challenged. She had a huge seizure disorder and was having 500 seizures a day, kind of from the moment she was born. And we, my husband and I both had big jobs, big careers before this child. And I found that with the birth of this beautiful, sweet, little innocent baby who just happened to have this horrible condition, everything my husband and I had carefully built came crashing down. And I just had nowhere to put my feet on solid ground. I mean, we were losing everything, friends and our marriage and our finances and my career, everything I had worked for, all to love and care for this little baby. And when all else failed, for the first time in my life, I prayed, and I started getting unbelievably shocking answers, and I started journaling them. And I journaled all throughout the years in and out of hospitals, sleeping on ICU, NICU, neonatal intensive care units, and pediatric intensive care units all over the country looking for a cure. And I realized that God wasn't just giving this to me for my own comfort, but it was for the thousands of other families we were running across in the hospitals and waiting rooms and therapies all over the country. And my heart and my eyes soon opened up to it was happening for families caring for loved ones with cancer and dementia and mental illness and Parkinson's and, just everything. It's anybody who is having to lay down their life to care for someone else was going through what I was going through. And then it just, through one open door after another, the booklets got published and my church let me start teaching, and somehow it got out. That's how I ended up where I am now.
you've already answered one of my next questions, was when we talk about a caregiver, who are we caring for? And the list is lengthy
Oh,
because it could be a spouse or child, which we think of most commonly. Um, and I also had a medically fragile child, my second son, when early on in his years. So I get that part. And then later on in my life, much like this idea of everything seems to fall to the wayside, I began caring for members of my husband's family that we had no known plan. That was not our life plan, right? You just don't know what's going to happen. And so it could be anything. In my case, I ended up inheriting, is how I call it. I inherited three individuals. Two had dementia, and one had a substance abuse problem who was not yet embracing sobriety. And so it became a significant challenge. I love the line from your website about Paige, and I used it when I introduced you, that you began teaching content to small groups as an excuse to have other caregivers to share with. What is it about caregiving that can feel so isolating?
oh, well, you think it's because um, you've got so much on your plate that you just don't have time for other people and your hobbies and other things. Okay. Well, what's really happening is you're mentally isolating,
Mm-hmm.
and you're choosing to see yourself in this. It's just easier if I do it myself. It's too hard to explain to somebody else how to do this, or what we're supposed to be doing here. So it's just easier if I do it myself. And that might be true, but then in your head, when you're doing it and there's no one around helping you, you're going, well, nobody's helping me. Okay, but you just told everybody who wanted to help you get
You didn't need
lost.
it. You're going to do it
Right.
yourself.
Right. So you've got that pattern going on. And then the self-pity sets in. And then not only have you told the people that you want to help you to kind of get lost, you won't allow people to help you. But now you have become what I like to phrase as prickly, because you become easily offended because you're living in a world of self-pity. And so this isolation is like self-perpetuating, and it builds bigger and bigger and bigger into, not only have you physically isolated yourself from other people, but you've emotionally and spiritually isolated yourself. It's a thing.
It is a
I
thing.
did it.
And I think, you know, there's that other piece of it too, and you talk about it in the book, that you begin using the language of the disability or disease, and people's eyes glaze over, and they don't get that part, and so you're like, well, they don't get me, so now so they're not going to help, right? You may now this may or may not have, I don't remember this being in there, but I had family members that I've been working with and trying to get them help. There are not services available for all of the things that they need. And so, I'm fortunate. This week I just started I hired a caregiver for Monday and Wednesday this week to test it out. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to have 5 hours, right? 5 hours of time that I can focus on other things. And I think we need to be accessing the resources that are there and not giving up when it seems like there aren't always resources to support us in a given way. We've got to keep asking and being open to the opportunities that might present themselves for people to help us.
And a lot of people who are caregivers will say, well, that's easy to say, but maybe you live in a state where you have resources, but resources are really drying up.
They
I
are.
mean, you're in the middle of a caregiving crisis. I mean, this is a real problem, and nursing homes are understaffed and hospitals are understaffed. And, direct care support workers hardly exist, so I mean, we're in a real crisis, so what are we going to do? And that's kind of my big thing is, your program is all about people who are change makers, and we've come to the point where even the churches have institutionalized care.
Mhm.
When somebody has a need, you send them to an agency that takes care of that. But the way things are meant to work is we're meant to be there for each other,
Yes.
and we have lived in a world that's deprogrammed that out of us. I live for myself, I live for my needs, I live for my schedule, I live for my income. But I think the tables are really turning, and it's time to introduce inner healing that will allow us to be people who have the capacity to care for other people without it causing a complete family breakdown and the breakup of marriages, which is what's happening now because the
Yes.
pressure is so great.
It's
So
it's
it's
significant.
turning that tide.
Absolutely. One of the things that I appreciate, and let me just be really clear, this is a faith-based approach, and I appreciate the fact that it is such. You write in the book about 5 steps to transformation. So it's assess, acknowledge, align, affirm, and then act. So anchored in faith-based approach. Describe some of the challenges faced by caregivers and how these steps enable that transformation.
Well, I won't go through all 5 steps because that in itself would be a whole nother interview.
That would
But
be another interview.
to
Yes.
address your question, one of the things that's the hardest of all is the fact that there is no doubt that once you take on the care of someone else, whether it's your beloved sweet mother that you've had a marvelous relationship with your whole life, or your precious little tender baby that can't even say ugly things back to you yet, you know, or, the easiest, sweetest, kindest person in the world still wreaks havoc with our emotions.
Mhm.
And, because you're layering somebody else's life on top of your own already busy life. And so, in order to care for other people, it takes a tremendous amount of humility and surrender and all those kind of things. But what is so hard to get people to look at is you were already having problems before this person came into your life. They're not the cause of all of your problems. You're letting their pain trigger your undealt with pain. And, because it seems like everything was fine until, Aunt Myrtle came to live with us, or everything was fine until we got the, diagnosis of autism. Everything was fine until, blah, like, I had to give up a trip, or I had to give up a career, and it's all your fault. They become the elephant in the room, the person we're caring for. But what's really happening is, no, your life wasn't perfect. And you had a lot of undealt with business, and having to take care of someone else who's suffering is starting to chip away at your own issues within you. And the only person you can change is yourself. You
Mhm.
can't change another person's Alzheimer's. You can't change another person's behaviors when they're autistic, So what are you going to do? How are you ever going to deal with it unless you start doing your own inner work?
The inner work first.
You have to, or else you'll never have peace. Because it's true in every situation. It isn't just caregiving. It's about the whole stinking world, and all it throws at you all the time is, can I get to a place where I can have peace and do things in a loving, patient manner, regardless of my circumstances?
I agree. I agree. And, you also speak to calling, right? And I think a lot of times when people think of the idea of calling, it's something we're meant to do, something we're supposed to do. But caregiving may feel not so much calling towards, but being called away from those dreams and plans that we were working towards, and then willingly take on this service to another, to and to it's a calling to be human. It's basically one of the ways I think about it. But you give a list of biblical heroes or characters that are in there. And the one that always has spoken to me at different points of time is Esther, where Mordecai tells her, who knows, but you've come to your royal position for such a time as this, right? Who knows that the reason you are now caring for these human beings is because you did live the conventional life. You did create resources and a home for yourself. You have things that they do not have, and therefore there is no other option for them. And so you're it. You're the one. You're being tapped on the shoulder for a reason. And who knows that the reason is not you have all these other things in your life because you're being equipped and prepared for this other role that you're now going to take on. And I don't know what is or is not the right answer there, but I feel like it's really easy to be caught up in, as you're alluding to maybe before, the why me, why not focus. Whereas it's like, well, I'm it. So what do I need to know now? How do I get ready for, and I called it when I was talking to some folks the first year that I went through. I'm like, I'm getting a crash course in Social Security and Medicare, and I do not know enough about this. Like, who out there knows about this? Because I do not know enough. And I think we just have to be open to those components that allow us to become better caregivers. I mean, we don't have the answer.
Well, you say it's about a calling and about the benefits of doing this. And let me take it up 30,000 feet. And it's not because you've been equipped and prepared to be a better caregiver. It's because we're being shown how to be better human beings and part of the human family. Because, consider this, everything in nature gives of itself constantly. A tree doesn't need oxygen. It gives off oxygen, but it doesn't need it to live. It needs CO2, right? Or it doesn't eat apples. It might produce apples, but it doesn't produce what it eats for itself. So we think about our lives bearing fruit. Well, we're not here to consume and to bear fruit so we can have more money, so we can have more stuff.
Right.
We're here to be consumed. We're here for others. The sun doesn't shine for itself. Okay. And the squirrel is food for the hawk. Nature just kind of works that way. Everything is for everything else. And that's the very nature of God. He gave himself away. That's the lesson of Jesus is I love you so much. I came to give myself away, and so our life should be a life of kenotic joy, and kenosis means giving yourself away. And being a caregiver, and the fact that there are so many people turning over the age of 65, and so the numbers of people are growing that have cancer and disabilities and all this, they're not getting less, they're getting more. And so many people living in a world where we're here to build ourselves up are having these complete breakdowns when you have to completely give yourself away to someone else. Yes. But I believe it's a powerful movement of God that is showing people, I don't care what faith you are, that we are here to be a part of the human family and to contribute. And it's not an institution or a political party or a certain church that's going to solve the problem. It's us when we realize who we are and the way we're supposed to live together. It wasn't that long ago. Right. It wasn't that long ago that we willingly took in grandma. Nowadays, everybody falls into a complete panic. And it's not everybody. There are still some amazing people who willingly take in, people who are weak and suffering and disabled. But the majority of people look at their old age and beg their children, please don't put me in a nursing home, because that's what we do now.
Mhm.
So I believe it's a calling back to the essence of what it means to be human. It's
Yeah.
not just a calling to be a caregiver for someone else, but to teach the rest of the world how to love and care selflessly.
It's you write about what can be done through us through the process, and that it models it's modeling not only that your care for that other human is a gift to them, but it's also demonstrating how it's demonstrating service to others, and it gives them an image of how we can be different.
Yeah, and I guess the other really hard concept in this, but once you've been through the process of the 10 weeks, and sometimes you have to go through it lots of times, this is hard. This is shifting a complete mindset that's around us all day, every day. But the other thing is what a gift our daughter's brokenness has been to us.
Mhm.
And the gift, my mother-in-law had cancer and dementia, and my husband's an only child, and we had to take care of her as well. And in the beginning, I just thought it was the most horrible thing that could have possibly happened, but it ended up being their brokenness has become, you can begin to see it as a gift to us that pushed us beyond ourselves and pushed us to a point of loving supernaturally and
Mhm.
of finding abilities within ourselves that we didn't know we were capable of, and watching principles, divine principles, be played out because we couldn't do what our flesh thought it needed to do, and we had to rely on divine love, God, source, universe, you know?
Yes, yes. I think goes back to that, if our well is dry, what are we going to rely on? Right. Before we conclude our conversation, let's ask the audience a question. So if you're watching and you are a caregiver, share one way you can give yourself the rest and the grace that you need on this journey. But if you are not a caregiver, share one gift or talent that you possess that could help support a caregiver in your life. And I will bet that you know somebody who is giving care to another person who could love to have, be grateful to have something that you have to give. So just so you know, the comments are below. You know how to do that. I read each and every one and I will respond. Mary, while they are adding comments or their thoughts into the comment section, what is something that people would not learn from reading your bios, your book, any social profiles? What's not there that would be something they wouldn't
I've been doing this for 30 years and it's still hard.
know?
Everybody goes, oh, but you make it sound like that you've really hit nirvana and you do this all with total grace and peace. And, I am light years better than I was in the beginning, but it's still a struggle.
Mhm.
The day to day is hard stuff. And
Yes.
especially in a world that is constantly telling me to do it a different way, it's very hard to choose love.
Yes. Yes. I think it was in our email as we were preparing for this. I really, work with people and talk with people about a pivot. And I don't feel like, when I share with them, I say, look, a pivot, it doesn't have to be 180 degrees. It can be 35 degrees. It could
Right.
be 5 degrees, right? You can make small incremental changes that have a huge impact on your life and the work that you give out to the world. So is there something that speaks to you about pivoting in your life that you feel that a story would help others learn and grow from that experience you've had?
Well, I guess to put it as succinctly as possible is what I thought was going to be the complete and total ruin and end of me I discovered was an invitation to a new beginning, and to see things, to see the world differently, to see people I had overlooked, never been interested in, never actually I stuck my nose up, at a lot of quite snobby, of people, come on, can't you just get yourself together and get on down the road? Come on, pull yourself up. And having a child that just shatters all that completely, and realizing I have something to contribute, and it's not just writing a check. It's not just my opinion. I have love to give, and I have love to receive from people I would have never thought had so much to teach me.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts before we close out?
Well, for everybody out there who's a caregiver, one of my biggest thoughts and proven concepts is, you may be in a support group, but support groups are kind of a bunch of people getting together and sharing stories and all that, which is wonderful. But getting in a group that actually has a curriculum to help get you out of the hole. So you're not all just down there in the mud wrestling going, I know my life's so terrible too, but a curriculum that says, I'm taking steps to get up out of this, and you're coming with me. Those kind of groups are absolute lifelines, because you're not alone. There are lots of other people that feel the same feelings that you are feeling, with resentment and guilt and shame and fear and all those things. You're not alone. And once you get in a group, what a relief it is to have a safe place to express those thoughts and feelings. And then for the rest of the world that isn't taking care of someone else, which isn't very many left of us, because everybody's taking care of somebody somehow, but just acknowledge that you see the people out there, even if you don't have time to actually do anything about it. It's something important when you can say, I see you, and I know it's hard.
Yes.
That helps a lot.
It does. It does. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to listen to the conversation with Mary and I. Please subscribe to the channel so you know when the next awesome video hits the feed, because that's how we learn and grow. And you'll take away things that help you live for today and not someday. The Heart of the Caregiver is available on Amazon, and we will add a link in the description. There are several ways for you to reach out and connect with Mary. There is the website for the book, theheartofthecaregiver.com. There's a Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram profile. We'll put all of those links in the video description, as well as have the link so that you can access the book via Amazon. So with one more thank you, I just want to encourage you to go forth and do great things. Thank you.